And then I guess the final part of the trifecta, or the trinity, as we called it,
Right.
should we talk about? I mean, I don't know if I can even talk that much on Nev Campbell outside of the Scream franchise. I did actually see her recently in the movie Skyscraper. I don't know
She's
if
an interesting actress.
She's an interesting actress. And she is. So I said before that I enjoy the soap opera-y nature of Scream 1, and I think the main thing that counters that in a really beautiful, realistic way is Nev Campbell's performance as I'm forgetting
Sidney Prescott.
Sidney Prescott.
Hello, Sidney.
When you see her in the first movie, she is so convincingly, I mean, outside of the obvious sort of like putting her in a white pajamas, the purity sort of like visual aspect of that, I think her performance, and I'm assuming she was like an actress. I don't know, like actually, let me just look. I'm just looking at. So she was in her 20s by the time it looks like that she was doing this performance, and she doesn't seem like that. She seems like a child. She seems naive. She seems
teenager,
inexperienced, and it is just kind of, you see her in that opening scene and you know she's the main character immediately, and somehow you also just empathize with her immediately. And I mean, there's the obvious kind of, she has the backstory of her mother was murdered, but even before I knew that, I just kind of was, I'm kind of drawn in by her. And I think that I do kind of, now that you mentioned it earlier, I do remember that one of the things that I didn't enjoy about 3 as well is her kind of absence in that movie, because she does kind of almost disappear for a while. And so this one, Scream 2, is smart enough to keep her kind of at the forefront.
Right at the center.
As the main character, in that one. And Scream 4 as well really kind of brings her back in a way that I just kind of, once again, I love the universe kind of turning in on itself and the horrors of the past sort of like revisiting her. I feel like Scream 4 is so satisfying.
It's so
when he
good.
pulls that off,
And honestly, her delivery of the line of "Don't fuck with the original," I think is like a truly like, it's such. I think about that line delivery. It's so good.
You're right. When I think of just memorable lines from this franchise, I think I go more to the scene. It's 4. There's in Scream 4, it's one is just like, I'm gay, if it helps, like, and then stab.
If it helps, yeah. That kid, oh my gosh,
he's a great performance in that too. But then also probably what I would call the most successful actually laugh of the entire franchise for me is when Trevor interrupts, I can never remember her name, Hayden Panettiere's character making out with Rory Culkin. Not making out, but they're kissing really quickly.
Her name was Kirby.
Kirby. Nice. Kirby. And
I haven't seen that movie in years.
I hadn't seen it in years, and then I watched it again today, this morning. But the scene where she's like kissing Kirby for a split second, and then Trevor walks in, he sits down, and he's completely oblivious. And Rory Culkin is just like super fucking pissed about it, or maybe not even super pissed about that. But spoilers to Scream 4, super pissed about the fact that he's realizing he needs to murder Hayden Panettiere, and he's like, "It's too late, bitch." But I think the funny line comes when he leaves. Big knife. It comes when he leaves, and Trevor is just like, "Did I interrupt something?" And he looks at Kirby and he's like, "Shut the fuck up." And Kirby goes, "Who invited you, Trevor?" Oh,
that's so
that had
funny.
me laughing.
Dude,
in your words,
so
that
good
had
in
me
that
laughing
movie.
out loud. Guffaw. I was dying.
Yeah. Who invited you? That movie's really good.
It's so good.
Nev
Campbell, sorry.
I will say Nev Campbell, so like her odd narrative with it was that from 94 she was on Party of 5, which was kind of like a big TV show through the 90s, through the entire back half of the 90s. It also spawned Matthew Fox, who ended up being the lead on Lost, who is apparently a bit of a shitbag in his own ways, but it's just, Party of Five was kind of this show that had like 6 fucking seasons. It's about
Really successful, yeah.
It's about a family of 5 children between the ages of like 18 and 18 months, where their parents die in a car accident and they all just kind of have to, like, they're all orphans now and they're all living together.
Yep.
And so she was like high schooler on Party of Five for a couple years when Scream happened. And that thing where they're like, well, people know who she is, so she's going to kind of be relative to the trailer, but we're really going to put a lot of the emphasis on Drew Barrymore and really let that get cut out from the beginning of that. And I think that's a great move in that original movie.
Yeah.
And it gives space for Neve Campbell to give a great performance. And the same year as Scream, she's in The Craft, which she's awesome in. And The Craft is great.
I haven't seen that in years. I don't know if I remember it well enough, but I just remember it's weird to, like,
also has Skeet Ulrich.
Maybe it's weird to describe these movies this way, but these movies came out when I was a child, and I think when I really was aware of The Craft and Scream, I was more in the middle school age, and I more just looked at those movies. I more looked at The Craft poster, and it was just like, well, that looks like a sexy fucking movie.
Hot goth girls.
Yeah. That movie poster,
I mean,
probably,
that's okay. Hot goth girls.
That movie poster probably fucked with me more as a child than anything else, but
yeah, but that movie is a lot of fun, and it's spooky in a lot of fun ways.
I remember
then a couple years.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, I just remember the main character I don't know if it's the main character in The Craft, but I remember, like, in the finale of The Craft, there's this character. I'm trying to remember the actress's name. It's
is it Robin Tunney?
No, I think it's Fairuza Balk. Fairuza Balk, is that how you pronounce
Balk.
that? She goes fucking bananas at the end of that movie, and I think that's the only thing I really remember about that movie is she just goes fucking batshit insane.
Yeah.
But continue. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, yeah, she does. It's a great performance from Fairuza Balk in that. Yeah. And then she does Scream 2 back to back. Basically, all the actors in those movies, just their credits are just back to back. 96, 97, Scream 2. Yep. And then in 98, she does Wild Things, which is also like a huge slam of a movie. Like, this just pulpy.
Once again,
everyone gets a reaction out of it.
As a youngster, I was like, well, that looks sexy.
Hot girls. Yeah. Sure.
I've never seen it.
Neve Campbell, but Neve Campbell was absolutely a sex symbol, but she was, I think, a great actress who was constantly kind of playing the kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of like emo or reclusive girl. And she also, in 2000, same year as Scream 3, was in that movie Drowning Mona that I was talking about, that Casey Affleck was in.
Yeah.
And that's and that Danny DeVito was in, and she's also great in that. And then she kind of just like becomes a TV actress getting some small roles, and she's just kind of like lived her life, She ended up doing like a couple later seasons of House of Cards.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. Skyscraper as well. She's pretty prominent in that film.
Right, as you said.
And that movie is basically a far inferior, kind of not so subtle reboot of Towering Inferno, but it has its moments, and Neve Campbell certainly is putting in a decent performance. What is his name? Rawson Marshall Thurber? I don't even. Gosh, I'm like all over the place with that name. It's like Rawson Marshall Thurber. Yes, he's the writer director. I believe he also did like Dodgeball. So I mean, he's like, he knows how to make a movie. And like,
interesting.
So I mean, there's something fascinating to the way the movie's made, actually, I will say. Like, there's a lot of visual effects to it, but I kind of think they pull off some dazzling imagery, and I'm sure, I didn't see it in theaters, but I'm sure in theaters it probably was fucking intense in those moments. There's a couple of moments of intensity, but it doesn't really capture the harrowingness that Towering Inferno does. But Neve Campbell is good in it, and The Rock is a fucking, he's a fucking a rock that could just barrel through walls. That's what he is.
Which can maybe make things less interesting sometimes. I don't know. I also
Yeah.
want to say Nev Campbell has a small 1-episode role in Mad Men, which is it's kind of like a weird episode where it's like Don is on a flight back from California back to New York, and he's sitting next to Nev Campbell, and she's like a rich woman who inherited some money, and they kind of just like fall asleep with their heads on each other's shoulders and just like become friends. And then she like kind of invites to maybe if he wanted to like come back to like the hotel she was staying at, and he's just like no, and like they're, which I guess is just kind of showing the place he's in his life where he's willing to turn down Nev Campbell. And but it's just, I don't know, but it's so strange because you're like, this is like 1 or 2 scenes. What the fuck is Nev Campbell doing here?
I mean, she's
working. Good. It's nice and it's
she's
super
working.
Charming.
She's just working.
But it's one of those things where I was like, and it's like maybe like the first episode of a season. So you're like, so Nev Campbell's got to come back, right? Like they set this thing up and it just never happens.
Yeah, I mean, in relation to what you said earlier about her kind of being labeled as this sort of sex symbol in that sort of mid-90s period, I don't mean to kind of, I was young and I was a kid, burgeoning on my hormones. I was kind of like, I don't mean to like mirror that sort of like that kind of shitty perspective that sometimes happens to actresses in this industry. But I did want to say that I think in relation to what you said about her being this sort of like sex symbol and this like dark reclusive character usually, I think Scream as a franchise, what I love about that is it actually is not doing that. Like, she maybe is a little reclusive, but I don't think so, because she seems to make friends very quickly. They just usually die, unfortunately. She seems actually very sociable.
No, that's true.
Like, I like that also. Scream, in a lot of ways, it's kind of nice. I'm trying to think of any, like, exceptions. My partner, Natalie, definitely made a comment watching the first Scream. She basically made the comment of, like, the extras in this movie, a lot of the women seem to have been cast for their bodies or their figures in some ways, which I think she was implying that it's sort of the shittiness of just the Weinsteins and how they kind of decide to cast movies and stuff like that.
With the way they populate it.
However, the way Wes Craven, and I think probably the way he's indicating to his costume designer to dress these women, he's... it's a horror movie, so he wants it to be sexy, but I like that the Scream movies aren't overly sexualized. They're showing you usually the figures of women in addition to showing you the figures of the men. But, like, it's not... Even though, like, oddly enough, whenever we see the movies, the stab movies that are featured in the Scream movies, there's usually some shower scene or something like really kind of like cliche and sexual about the horror franchise that the Scream franchise actually never does. Like, I like that it never dips into that kind of shitty area of depicting, and I think that's why she's kind of, even though her career hasn't been super... It's not that it hasn't been super successful. It's not like she's super present and apparent in the pop culture always. She's the queen. She's the queen of Scream. She doesn't need anything else. Like, that franchise, she owns it.
No. And I hope that when I was saying that she was a sex symbol, I hope that wasn't, I wasn't trying to be dismissive or derogatory.
I think you weren't being. Like, I was afraid I was saying something that was interpreted that way. I didn't want to be.
She was like a beautiful, talented actress who had an effect on a generation, and it's kind of undeniable. Yeah. And so I totally agree with you. And that, I think almost in all 4 of the movies, there is like a sequence of like the thing. They basically create the moment where a normal horror movie would have its moment of gratuitous nudity, and they don't do it. Like, all 4 movies, they create that moment and then don't do that thing. And I think that that's obvious. And as you said, in the version of Stab 1, it's Heather Graham getting into the shower as opposed to just like all of those versions of it. I think you're right. It's very intentional and it's very smart.
You do have sometimes bras, but I don't know. I still think that's pretty respectful in the horror world.
And I think that it is being very clearly and intentionally
And I love
tasteful in certain ways.
I love the line in the first one, I think, that Jamie Kennedy has of, what is it? It's like, someone says, like, when is Jamie Lee Curtis going to show her boobs? And he's just like, 1983, Trading Places. Never shows her boob in the horror world. Like, she's just like, waiting for the big paycheck or something like that.
Waiting for the big, didn't show her tits till she went legit. Like,
Yeah,
it's
didn't
like
show her
kind of
tits till
funny.
she
Like,
went
that's a
legit.
funny way to put it.